friends, welcome to Lovin' Life's Journey DIY. I'm Chantel. Thank you so much for watching. Today's video is filled with DIYs that celebrate the true meaning of Easter. And I've also put in just some inspirational DIYs, so I hope that you enjoy them.
We're going to start off with a beautiful floral DIY using this bucket and also a wooden cross from Dollar Tree. And for my florals, I'm going to be using this one bunch of flowers that I picked up at Dollar Tree as well. This is a larger bunch of flowers, so it did cost $3, but I think it's totally worth it because of the size and just how pretty they are. I'll also use some floral foam and some antique wax or stain, and then some of this really pretty ribbon that says "He is risen." I'm also going to use one 12-inch dowel. First, I'll remove the base of the cross, and sometimes these just pop right off, but this one was glued pretty well, so I loosened that using my heat tool, and then I was able to remove it pretty easily. And I took some sandpaper and just went over mostly the edges where there were some little rough spots and splinters and just smoothed it all out. And then I used some of this antique wax and I watered mine down to make kind of a stain. I like using this because I think it's easier to work with than a stain, but you can just use a wood stain or you can use a brown acrylic paint and water it down a little bit as well. And while I've got my stain out, I will go ahead and stain my little dowel as well. While those are drying, I will fill my bucket with some floral foam. And here's a little tip. If your foam needs to be cut down, a metal ruler works great for just slicing that foam. And so I'll put foam in the bucket up to about a couple inches from the top. And I did secure the top pieces to the bottom pieces using some hot glue. For adding your flowers, you will want to pay attention to where the seam is on your bucket and make sure you face that to the back. And I'll use some wire cutters and cut apart my floral stems so I have individual flowers so that I can kind of arrange them how I want to. I just love the colors of these flowers. I think these are perfect for an Easter arrangement. I'm going to use all of these flowers, and it's the perfect amount for filling up this bucket and having a nice full arrangement. Next, I'll attach the dowel to the back of my cross using some hot glue. This is going to allow me to put the cross into the arrangement and still have most of the cross portion showing. I'm placing mine kind of toward the back of my arrangement, but you can place this wherever you like. And then I am making a bow using this ribbon that I picked up at Dollar Tree. I always prefer to use wired ribbon when I'm making a bow. It just makes the bow have a better shape and is really easier to work with. But I just really liked this ribbon because it says he is risen on it. And so I decided to go with it. It is only one-sided, so I'm having to do a twist in between each loop so that I have the patterned side facing out. And I just tied mine off with some twine, and then I'm going to glue mine to the rim of the bucket, kind of up underneath the flowers, just to add that little accent. And so it's not going to be super prominent, but I like how the brown on the ribbon kind of ties in with the stained cross. For this next project, I'm using this decorative egg that I got at Dollar Tree for $3. I think it's super pretty just the way it is. It's a little bright of a yellow for my decor, so I'm going to give it a little bit of a makeover. Going to use some off-white chalk paint and this sage green colored paint. Since this does have somewhat of a smooth surface, I decided to go over it with some sandpaper just to rough it up a little bit so that my paint would hopefully stick better to it. And I debated on whether to go with the sage green paint first or the off-white. And you can see that I decided on the off-white. So I am painting the entire egg with my chiffon cream chalk paint. Once that paint is completely dry, I am going to take my green paint and just get a little bit of it on a dry brush and brush over the entire egg. And I really like how this brings out the pattern that is on the egg. And you could do it the other way as well, paint the egg with the green color and then brush over it with the white. But I kind of like how this just really brings out the detail. And I decided to go a little darker, so I went over mine again, and I uh, think this brought the pattern out even more. You can see here the difference. The yellow egg has a white dry brushing on it, but the details just don't show like they do with the egg that I painted. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. For this next project, I'm using these egg decor pieces that come in a 2-pack at Dollar Tree. I'm also using some pretty spring napkins as well as some ribbon, and I'll also be using some Mod Podge. So I took my napkin and I traced around my egg and so I could kind of get an idea of the design and where the placement was going to be and then cut that out. Then I peeled off the backing of the napkin because it's a two-ply napkin and I just want the top layer. And before I decoupage the napkin onto the egg, I am going to remove the hanger, but I'm going to save the ribbon so that I can put it back on once I'm finished. I'm going to brush a good amount of the Mod Podge onto the front of the egg, but I am making sure I don't have any uh, bumps or globs of it so that my napkin will go on smooth. And then once I press that on and get any wrinkles out, then I'll just go over the top of that with a layer of the Mod Podge as well. And because I am an impatient crafter, I used my heat tool to help mine dry quickly. It only takes a few minutes this way. And once that's dry, I'm going to use a piece of sandpaper to go around the edges and get off any of the extra napkin that might be overlapping the edge. Then I just used a pencil to poke through the napkin where the hole is so I can still put my ribbon back to hang it. And my original plan was to use this He Is Risen ribbon to put a little accent on here, but it just didn't look right, so I decided not to use it. Dollar Tree also carries these eggs in a pink and a yellow color, And so I decided to do some of these in different colors and just place the napkin on a little bit differently to get some different designs on the eggs. And I just made a set of these. And as you can see here, I didn't trace around this. In fact, you can Mod Podge the whole thing, and then once it's dry, go ahead and use the sandpaper to get off the excess, even when you have a lot of it overlapping or hanging over. I decided to paint the back of my eggs using different colors. So one I'm doing in green, and then I did one in yellow and one in pink. And I decided also to dry brush a little bit of lighter paint. So I'm using this chiffon cream chalk paint, and I wanted to just dry brush over these to tone them down just a little bit because they seemed a little bit bright. And this also just gives them a little bit of texture as well. I had these little cross cutouts from Dollar Tree, so I decided to use those as some accents on the backs of these. So I'm going to do each egg a little bit different. This one, I put the cross on the top, and then I'm writing, "He is risen" below it. And I'm going to just freehand this and go over it with a black Sharpie marker. If you wanted to make it look real professional and you had a Cricut machine, you could do that. Or you could maybe find a decal or a stencil to use. But I decided just to go freehand with this. For this egg, I decided just to paint the cross in an off-white color, the same paint that I used to dry brush on it, and then glued it to the center of the egg. And I didn't write anything on this one. I just left it with just the cross. For the third one, I put the cross in the center of the egg, and then I wrote on the top and the bottom. And so all three of my eggs are different, but they still coordinate because they have that cross on them. I think these turned out really cute, and I love how you can mix and match them. For this project, I will be using this set of decor pieces from Dollar Tree. I'll also be using this hanging home decor piece as well as this adorable little frog that are from Dollar Tree as well. And I'm going to use my sage green chalk paint as well as my off-white chalk paint too. I'm starting off by untying the top of the twine of this hanging piece, and I'm removing one of the wooden beads. And I'll tie a knot in the twine, and I tied it a couple of times, like in the same place to make a thicker knot, just so it would be big enough that it wouldn't slide into that hole of that one bead. And then I'll push the bead up against that knot. And then I am going to slide everything down up against that knot. I'm trying to get a little more space on the bottom or the other end of this, so I'll be able to uh, tie a knot in that end as well. And I did add just a little bit of hot glue between the E and that last bead because I just wanted it to hold tight. And then I cut off that tassel as close to the tassel as I could to give me enough twine to get that knot tied. So this is what I am left with, and I don't want those letters on there, so I am going to sand them off a little bit. And this step is optional, but it will save having to paint multiple actually quite a few coats of paint over them. So by sanding it off, you only have to do one or maybe two coats of paint instead of four or possibly five. So now I'll take my green paint and paint over these. And I lucked out because my green paint was almost exactly the same shade as what was already on this. So I did not have to paint the sides and the back or anything. I just could paint the tops to paint over those letters. And I did have to do two coats. And actually on the H, I had to do three because I didn't sand it off enough. For my lettering on these, I'm going to be using a combination of this stencil from Dollar Tree as well as some freehand. And I'm putting an acronym for frog on these, and it is fully rely on God. So I'm putting the stenciled letters, FROG, I'm putting them not in the center of each circle, but actually over to the left a little bit because I'm going to freehand the rest of the words next to it. I'm filling in my stenciled letters with my chalk paint. You could actually stencil the letters on. However, sometimes I feel like that gets kind of messy looking. So I decided to trace them with a pencil and then fill them in with a liner paintbrush. I'm really comfortable doing this, but if you're not, then doing the stencil is fine. One tip for doing this with a paintbrush is to water your paint down just slightly so that it flows a little bit better. And I'm using my paintbrush to do my lettering as well, the freehand lettering. But if you're not comfortable with this, you can use a paint marker. So just kind of use what you're comfortable with and what you have. Or you can practice on a scrap piece of wood painting and see how it comes out. Who knows? Maybe you'll find that you can do it that way and that you have a talent for that and that you really like the way it looks. It really just takes some practice and having a nice thin paintbrush. So give it a try. And of course, using a Cricut machine is always an option too. Next, I'm going to take those two square decor pieces and I am going to place the smaller one on top of the larger one and glue it down using some of this gel super glue that I picked up at Dollar Tree. I really like this because it doesn't run all over the place and yet it still sets up pretty quickly. It's not immediate, but it's just within a minute or so, it's starting to set up. So I really like that. And I'm going to glue this on the top because I'm making a little base. And I really love the design on this top decor piece. I just think that is so pretty. I love the sage green. That's kind of a really in color right now. Or maybe it's just all in my head because it's one of the colors for my daughter's wedding that's happening in a couple of months, and so I just am seeing it everywhere. I'm going to take the piece that I painted my little frog acronym on and hot glue it to the front of my riser, making sure that the circles don't hang down below the bottom of that box so that it will sit flat. And I just styled this with my frogs from Dollar Tree and some greenery and a silk flower, and I love it. I think it's so cute and it just makes my heart happy. For this project, I will be using this unfinished wood cross that I picked up at Dollar Tree, and I'm going to be using these little laser cut words also from Dollar Tree. In fact, everything, including this garland, is from Dollar Tree, except this greenery. I had this on hand. And this sign is also from Dollar Tree. I love the finish on this and the size. For $1.25, that's an amazing deal. I'm going to start by removing the jute twine hanger and the label off of the back of the cross. I guess I really didn't need to remove the label because it's not going to show at all, but it's just a habit. Next, I'm going to take my little berry garland and I'm going to kind of figure out the size and how much I need to go around about 3 times and trim that off. And then I am going to just wind that and my little pieces of greenery into a wreath. And so this is just really easy to do. You don't need any extra wire. You can just use that garland because it is wired to form the wreath. So now I'm going to use some jute twine and I'm going to wrap that around the top of the wreath probably 6 or 7 times. And then I'm going to put it through the hole in the top of the cross and wrap it around through that hole over the top of the cross about 3 or 4 times just to hang it from that cross and just fill up that hole and kind of disguise it. And then I'll secure that on the back using some hot glue and trim off the excess twine. I'm going to position the cross more toward the left side of the sign so that I have room for my word rejoice on the right side. Then I'm going to attach both of these pieces using my Gorilla Hot Glue. I'm really liking the way this project looks with the natural wood tones. What do you think? Would you like to see it with more color or are you liking the natural look as well? Leave me a comment and let me know. All the supplies for this project came from Dollar Tree, except for my pastel colored paints, although you can find those at Dollar Tree as well. So for this project, I will be using this little wire basket. I'll also be using a package of the plastic eggs and some Easter grass, as well as this white lace ribbon and some of these rub-on transfers. I'll also be using some chalk paint in the color of linen white, and I'm just using some white paint to mix my pastel colors into because I want really pale light pastel colors. So I'm going to put some white paint in my paint tray and then just add a few drops of the colors until I get a mix of colors that I'm happy with. Then I'm going to paint my plastic eggs, and this does take several coats to get a good coverage on them. And so I did use my heat tool to help dry in between coats. I did 2 pink, 2 green, 1 blue, and 1 yellow, but you can do any color combination that you like. Once all the coats of paint are dry, I'm going to go over my eggs with some matte finish Mod Podge. And this will help keep the paint on the eggs, especially when I use the rub-on transfers. It will help keep the transfers from trying to pull the paint off the eggs. And I wanted to make sure that mine were good and dry before I tried to do the transfers, so I did use my heat tool to help dry these. The eggs are plastic, so you don't want to get the heat tool too close to them when you're doing this. While those are completely drying, I am going to prep my little basket. I'm using my lace ribbon to go around the top of the basket, and then I also did go around the bottom of the basket as well. I wanted the handle on my basket to stand up, so I used some hot glue because it didn't want to stand up on its own. Then I'm going to add my Easter grass into my basket and it will be all ready for my eggs. So now that my eggs are dry, I am going to cut out the words that I want to use from my rub-on transfers. And now I'll just start applying my rub-on transfers, one on each egg. And I am going to make sure that I don't have my eggs all facing the same direction for the words so that when they're in the basket, they're facing different directions, but you can still read the words. I did decide to go over the top of the rub-on transfer words with the Mod Podge again, just to help seal those onto the eggs and help keep them lasting longer. So I'm going to be honest here, I did not love the way this looked. And like I said, I did end up going back and adding the lace to the bottom of the basket. I thought that helped some, but I still was not really loving this. And so I tried adding some flowers to the basket, and I just decided the basket was kind of not working for me. So I decided to grab this little tray that I had on hand from Dollar Tree, and I'm going to leave it this color. I'm not going to paint it, and I'm going to add the Easter grass and my eggs in here. And when it was all said and done, I actually did like it better. I will be using this 11 by 14 inch photo frame from Dollar Tree. And I will also be using this 11 by 14 inch canvas board. This is, I think, the largest size that Dollar Tree carries. I'm going to be using one of these Cathedral window wall art pieces from Dollar Tree. If you can't find these, don't worry, you'll still be able to do this project. And then I'm going to use these pretty little roses that I found at Walmart. I think I paid like $1.49 or something for these. And to paint this project, I'm going to be using some Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory and also in ink. And then I will also be using some brown acrylic craft paint. So to start out, I'm going to give my canvas a coat of the Ivory chalk paint. I'm using a foam brush and I'm just going over this pretty quickly just to cover up the stark white with more of a softer off-white color. So next I'm going to remove that little sign that says Home Sweet Home off of the window decor piece, and then I am going to be using this just as a stencil basically. So I'm not actually going to be using this in the project as far as like gluing it to the project or anything. I'm just going to be tracing around it, so then I will have it to use in a different project. And so I am measuring so that I can get this centered, and then I will be tracing around the top part of the window. Now, if you can't find these at your Dollar Tree, I know a lot of you have been saying you haven't been able to find them. That's okay. You can find a picture of a similar type window just online and print that out and use it as a pattern, or just find, maybe even like Google a cathedral window coloring page maybe, or pattern or template. Just see what kind of images you can get to pull up, and then print something out that is a shape that you like, and you can use that for a pattern. So now that I have that traced onto my canvas with the pencil, I'm going to take that brown acrylic craft paint and a flat brush, and I am going to paint this. And I'm not going to paint it like real dark and solid. I want this to look kind of like weathered wood. So I've watered down my paint just a little bit, and then I am getting a little bit of the paint off of the brush so that it doesn't paint too dark. And I'm starting lighter than I really want it to be because I can always add more paint. So I'm just going to go over this, and then if I want to make it darker, then I can go back over it again. So if you are new to my channel, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I do a lot of budget-friendly DIYs, a lot of Dollar Tree DIYs, and if you enjoy that type of thing, be sure to hit the subscribe button and stick around. Also, remember to hit that bell and set your notifications so that YouTube will notify you when I upload new videos. So I decided just to stop with what I have here. I like the looks of this, so I'm going to use a white eraser and erase those extra pencil lines that I have in there so it looks nice and neat. Next, I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch up from the bottom and put a mark on each side of the canvas. I'm going to draw a line across this. This is going to be a guide for my lettering, and then I am going to make a mark every 3 inches from that first mark that I made on both sides as well, to draw lines across the canvas. And these are going to be my guide for drawing my boards for making it look like shiplap. So next I am going to take a really small liner paintbrush and some of the ink chalk paint, and I have watered the paint down quite a bit so that it has a thinner consistency so that I can draw thin lines with it. And you can see I'm kind of testing that with my paintbrush to see if I have good control with the consistency of the paint. And if you don't like to paint like this, or you don't have a steady hand, you can use just a marker to draw these lines on if you're more comfortable with that. Next, I'm going to use one of these metal paintbrushes from Dollar Tree. These have stiffer bristles and they are great for dry brushing. So I'm putting a little bit of the ink colored paint on my paintbrush and then wiping most of it off on the paper towel, and then I am rubbing it across the top of where I just painted those lines. You want to make sure that your lines are dry before you do this. And I'm going over the lines, specifically a little bit darker, just to highlight those lines, and then I am also dry brushing in between the lines just to give those boards a little bit of a distressed look. For my lettering, I thought about using some stickers, I thought about using some stencils. You can get all of these at Dollar Tree. I also thought about using my Cricut machine, but I wasn't sure how well the vinyl would stick to this rough canvas surface. So in the end, I decided just to get on my laptop and use the word processor, print out the lettering in a font and the size that I wanted, and I'm just going to go old school with this. And I'm going to go over the back of the paper where my lettering is with a pencil and just color over that so that I'm covering the whole area where the lettering is. And then I'm going to place this on my project where I want it, and I am going to just trace over my letters with a pencil, and then that is going to transfer the pencil on the back of the paper to my project so that I will be able to see where my letters are and use that as a pattern for copying the letters with a Sharpie marker. So then I'm just going to trace over the letters with a Sharpie marker, and this worked great. I was actually very surprised at how well the Sharpie marker wrote on the canvas. It didn't bleed at all, and it just went over that texture really well. So this was a really easy way to do the lettering. Next, I'm going to take that floral stem that I got at Walmart, and I pulled the leaves and the greenery off of it. I cut the little roses off, and then I am just arranging them and gluing them at the bottom of the window. Then the last step is to take the picture frame. I'm removing the back and I'm taking out the glass, and then I am going to place the canvas inside the picture frame. And my picture frame did come apart in the corner, so I did have to glue that, but once that was done, it was fine. And so I just placed the canvas inside the frame, added the back onto it so that I would still have the hanger, and then it was finished. That's it. So this piece could be set on a shelf or hung on the wall. You could also add your own hanger to it, but I love how it turned out. I am so happy with it. For For this next project, I will be using this wooden cross. I found this in the Crafter's Square aisle at Dollar Tree. I'll also be using these flowers from Dollar Tree. They're called crocus, and they are kind of a really pretty salmon color. And then I wanted something to fill in that cutout. I'm going to be using this, it's actually a paper. It almost looks like fabric. You could use fabric, but this is a specialty paper that I had left over from some projects. And then I am also going to be using that same brown craft paint that I used in the previous project. And for this, I'm going to be watering it down a lot, and I'm going to be using it like a stain. Now you could totally just use a stain for this. I kind of like using the acrylic paint watered down because it looks just like stain, but it is so much easier to work with. I think it's easier to clean up because it's water-based, and I just like using it. But if you prefer to use stain, then by all means use that. And I did go over mine twice just to give it a little bit of a darker shade. So now I'm just tracing around the cross on my paper, and I will cut that out and then glue that to the back of the cross. Next I'm going to add a few of the leaves, and then I will add some of the flowers to the base of the cross. And I felt like it needed a little something else, so I found these. They're called blossoming branches at Dollar Tree, but they look just like pussy willows. But I really liked the texture of these, and I felt like it kind of reminded me a little bit of a thorny bush or plant, which I thought with the cross was a really fitting thing to add in here. And so I really like kind of the contrast of this with the pretty flowers. I hadn't really planned it, but I really feel like the ruggedness of the cross and the kind of thorniness of these branches paired with the flowers and the elegant paper that I put in there just really is a great depiction of the pain and the beauty of what Jesus did for us on the cross. For this project, I will be using 24 of the Tumbling Tower blocks. Now, if you can't find these in your stores, be sure to check online at dollartree.com because they do carry these, and you only have to order 3 boxes of them, and you can have them shipped to your store. I'll also be using a couple of these 5-gallon paint stir sticks. I picked mine up at Walmart. You can also get them at Home Depot or Lowe's. I'm going to use 1 strand of these wood beads, the square ones. Now, I used exactly 1 strand, so I would recommend maybe picking up 2 just to make sure that you have enough. And I'm going to use 1 of these little chalkboard tags, also from Dollar Tree. And I'm going to use 1 of the larger craft sticks, as well as a little bit of wood filler, which can also be picked up at Dollar Tree. I'm going to use my chiffon cream chalk paint, as well as some of this eucalyptus that I picked up at Walmart. And I'm going to use this Easter ribbon from Dollar Tree. Instead of stain, I will be using some of this Waverly Antique Wax, but you could use a stain or just some craft paint that's watered down. I'm going to cut one of my paint stir sticks down so that I have a piece that's 13 and 7/16 inches long. Then I'm going to take my other paint stir stick and cut two pieces from it that are each 3 and 13/16 inches long. To do this, I'm going to use my miter box and saw. This just is a really easy way to cut small things like this. And I do have links down in the description box below to all of my favorite crafting tools if you ever want to see the things that I use. Next, I'm going to mark one of my tumbling tower blocks, the width of the paint stir stick. I'm going to stack 4 of the tumbling tower blocks together, and I'm using some painter's tape to tape them together. And then I am going to use my miter box and saw to trim these down because I need 4 blocks that are only the width of the paint stir sticks. Then I'm going to remove that painter's tape and I'm going to sand off any of the rough edges from the tumbling tower blocks as well as my paint stir stick pieces that I cut. Now I'm going to start assembling my cross, so I'm going to start with one of the short tumbling tower blocks that I cut down, and I'm going to use this super glue wood glue from Dollar Tree just to glue that on the top of my long paint stir stick. Then I'm going to use my other tumbling tower blocks and glue them along the edge as you see here. So I'm going to put 2 blocks down, and then I'm going to add my other short paint stir stick here and line it up with the edge of that second tumbling tower block. And these are going to make the sides of my cross. And so I'm going to add a little wood glue there and then just continue to go around the kind of just outlining my paint stir sticks with the tumbling tower blocks. I think I must have had one tumbling tower block that was a little shorter because I did end up with a gap, but that's okay. I'm going to fix that here in a little bit. For a little extra stability, I am gluing that craft stick on the back side of my cross, and then I'm putting a heavy book on this just to let that wood glue set up completely. Once it's completely dry, I am going to take some wood filler and fill that gap that I had there on the end. Apparently, not all tumbling tower blocks are created equal. I also decided to put a little bit of the wood filler in some of the other seams where the tumbling tower blocks meet, just to fill in any of the little gaps. That's totally optional. I actually didn't mind seeing the seams of where the tumbling tower blocks connected, but I thought I would fill in some of the larger gaps with the filler. And then once the wood filler has had time to completely dry, then I'm going to take a piece of sandpaper and sand down my cross, and that will get any of the excess wood filler off, make it nice and smooth. And after I finish sanding, I like to take a damp paper towel and just wipe off any of the dust that might be on it. Next, I'm going to take my Waverly Antique Wax. Like I said, you could use wood stain or even just a brown acrylic paint and water it down. I'm going to water down my antique wax and use this like a stain. And I don't want it to be too dark, so that's why I add a little bit of water to it. And I'm just going to go over the entire piece with this antique wax. And I am using a paper towel to wipe off any excess so that it doesn't get too dark. You can always go back over it if you want to darken it up, but it's hard to make it lighter once you've gotten it too dark. Now I'm going to set that aside and let it dry, and then I'm going to take my wood beads, which I measured out and figured out that I needed exactly the number of beads that were on this strand. So I'm going to just cut them off of the string that they come on, and I'm going to put them in a Ziploc bag. This is the cleanest and easiest way to paint wood beads. So I'm going to just roll down my bag and then put a little bit of paint inside the bag. I'm also going to add a little bit of water. Then I'll zip the bag up and just squish the paint all around until all the beads are covered. Then I'm going to pour all of the beads out onto a paper towel, and then I'm just using a stylus and a paintbrush to pull the beads apart so that they're separated and not stuck to each other. And also I use the paintbrush to clean up any little globs of paint that I might have on some of the beads. And then I used my heat tool to kind of dry them a little bit. I'm going to set them aside and let them dry completely. I want to kind of tone this down a little bit and make it a little bit more cohesive. So I am going to dry brush with a little bit of the chiffon cream paint onto my cross that I stained. And this is a personal preference. I know some people don't like dry brushing, but I tend to like it. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and then we'll also be adding some dry brushing to the beads as well. I'm going to take some of my wood glue and start gluing in my beads, and I'm just lining them up so that the holes won't show, and they may not fit in here perfectly, so if you do end up with a space, you want to make sure your space is right in the center of your cross, because that's where we're going to add some embellishments, and it's going to cover it up and you won't be able to tell. The reason I'm using wood glue instead of hot glue for these beads is because I want to be able to move them around a little bit so that I can make sure I get them nice and straight and evenly spaced inside the cross. And if you use hot glue, you have very little time to work with it. So the wood glue is a much better option. I'm going to let the glue set for a little bit, and then I'm going to take my antique wax and I'm going to lightly dry brush over those beads just on the top of them that I just put in there. And like I said, I'm just trying to kind of tone it down and make it all a little bit more cohesive. But if you like the darker contrast between the stain and the white beads, then I would not use the dry brushing. Next, I'm going to take a few pieces of the eucalyptus that I got at Walmart, and I'm going to lay them on the cross. Then I'm going to take my ribbon and make a loop and kind of measure on the cross to see how big I want it to be. And I'm going to just glue that in a loop. And the reason I'm going to make separate loops for my bow is because this ribbon says "He is risen" on it. And if I make a bow by twisting, then one side of the bow has the lettering upside down. So this way it's all right side up. So I just made 4 loops and put them on top of each other, then put a little smaller loop in the center, and I'm tying it off using some jute twine. Now I'm just going to go ahead and glue my eucalyptus leaves. And then I took a piece of my ribbon and I folded it in half, kind of twisted it around so that the words could be seen on both sides, and then I'm gluing that so that it hangs down for the tail of my bow, and then I'll go ahead and glue that bow to the center on top of my leaves. Now I'm going to take that little chalkboard clip and I'm going to use my heat tool and a little spatula to remove the clothespin from the back of it. And then I'm going to use a marker. This is just kind of like a gel pen paint marker maybe, and I'm writing blessed on mine. You can write whatever you want. And then I'm reattaching the clothespin the opposite way that it was on before, so that I can just clip it right to the bottom of the bow. And then I'm going to take a few of those berries that were on the eucalyptus and I'm going to tuck those in under the bow and secure them with a little bit of hot glue. And to finish this off, I will make a loop using some jute twine and then just hot glue that to the back of my cross. And I really love how this turned out, and I love that it is a symbol of the true meaning of Easter. For this next project, I'm going to be using this sign that I picked up at Dollar Tree. I'm also going to be using a little bit more of that eucalyptus from Walmart. And I think this bunch was around $5, but I've been able to use it for a lot of projects. And then I'm going to be using a little bit of this ribbon that I picked up at Dollar Tree. For paint, I will be using my chiffon cream chalk paint as well as some black spray paint. So I think this sign is really cute, but the pink polka dot design doesn't really go with my decor. So I'm going to remove the metal Easter blessings design from this sign, and I'm using my heat tool and my little old Cricut spatula, and if this is just loosening the glue, and the only hard part about this is you don't want to touch the metal part because it gets really hot, so you have to be careful of that. Then I'm going to use my little spatula and just scrape off some of the chunks of glue just to make this a little smoother. This side's actually going to be the back, and I am going to cover it with just some paper, but this will make it smoother. So I'm just getting off some of those chunks of glue, and then I'll go over it with a little bit of sandpaper as well. Next, I'm going to take that metal embellishment and I am going to paint it using the black spray paint. And while that's drying, I am going to use my chalk paint and paint the back side of my sign. And I did take the jute twine hanger out before I finished painting this, and I did have to give this 2 coats of paint. Now I'm going to take a little bit of black chalk paint and I am going to dry brush on this. This wide brush is about the same width as those little sections on the sign, so I thought it would make it look a little bit more like shiplap. So that's kind of what I'm following. Once the black spray paint was dry on that metal embellishment, I did go ahead and go over it with a couple of light coats of the clear matte sealer. And after my sealer was dry, then I am going to attach this back onto my sign using some hot glue. Then I added my jute twine hanger back onto my sign, and I'm using the same one that was on the sign before. Then I'm going to attach several of the eucalyptus branches together using a little bit of hot glue, and then I'm going to take a little bit of that ribbon and just wrap it around the stems up at the top. And then I'll take my little bundle of eucalyptus and just attach that to the jute twine hanger.
I hope you enjoyed this video full of DIYs to celebrate the true meaning of Easter. If you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And if you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to hit the subscribe button as well as the bell to set your notifications so that YouTube will notify you every time I upload a new video. If you did enjoy my DIYs and you'd like to see more, I have hundreds of videos here on my channel with lots of DIY inspiration. So I'll put another one of my favorite videos right here so you can check it out next. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a blessed day.